Okay, so today I'm going to do episode 9.2 in my Absolutist philosophy series, which might seem silly because normally, again, I only do the 0.5 episodes, but this topic is very overwhelming and there's a lot to talk about with it. So it's still the stigma effect, or as I call it, basically the credibility, sort of assessing human credibility through human history and the observable process and practice. So what it means is, like, if you're aware of history, and we've studied history and you're actively aware of it, you would understand that, human beings have been fooled by every lie possible. Human beings collectively, individually, they believe things that are that we know now to be false because of science, etc. They've believed all countless, even like religion, even if you believe in a particular one, right, they believe all different ones. So how can they all be wrong and yours be right? Like, there's a lot of fallacies built into here. Oh yeah, let's see today if the algorithm picks us up again, or maybe because that was like a test, maybe. I don't know how that works. Last time it was a horrible storm, right? And I'm driving through and it's a whiteout and all this stuff. But it happens to be that the algorithm picked me that day to send a lot of people in there. And unfortunately, not saying that even if I was doing this at my peak performance that it would really resonate, because it's a very specific kind of content. Like, you really think, I would love that implication. Oh, you're doing this for views. Like, the fact of, of all the things in human existence history, you could appeal to the stimuli acme, you could appeal to cult of personality, lowest common denominator. This is the least indicative of trying to do that, right? You're trying to do something that almost has the opposite effect, that it would push people away because it's kind of alienating. It triggers their cognitive dissonance. It makes people mad, right? Like, potentially, right? You could almost get in trouble for it to some extent. Not that it would be justified, but sometimes people misframe it too, like objectivity. I'm discussing abortion in a recent video, and people are taking it like I'm not really criticizing it, right? I'm laying it out in objective terms, and then people are getting mad, so it's kind of a projection. I'm not saying don't do it, right? I even say in that very same video, it shouldn't be illegal because I know people are going to do it anyway, right? Like, let me try to explain that one. It's just because that video triggered people. But, like, what would be an absolutist objective way to look at religion, right? Or not religion, abortion. Right, first of all, the word, let's understand the nature of the process. The word abortion itself is negative. If we take Kay's word from Godfather 2, an abortion is something that's unholy and evil, because, the word, the word itself, right, is negative, right? So that you should try to euphemize that. They try, pro-choicers try to euphemize the language around the fetus, like, oh, it's a fetus, not a baby, right? Which is nothing more than semantics. That's what the video is even about. But I'm surprised the word abortion itself isn't euphemized. You still tend to hear abortion. What is the euphemism for that, right? Terminating a pregnancy or something like that, but that's the word you would think would be the enemy, because that word by definition is negative, right? An abortion is something, it's almost like an abomination, or, just something horrible. So it's a negative word by definition. It's a process that we take for granted, maybe because our technology allows it, right? But does that make it better? Like, so if we didn't have the technology to do it comfortably or safely or whatever, thousands of years ago, now would we be so... Right, so it's kind of like, if technology makes something effortless enough, now we're more comfortable with doing it. Like a nuclear bombs in World War II, right? If we killed that many people, and a lot of them innocent people, if we had done that hand to hand with sticks and stones and fists, right? We would react a lot differently, even though the same result is there, right? So this is, don't specify the conflict. You're looking at, like, oh, we dropped the nuclear bombs and we just accept that. But if we had to go there manually, physically, hand-to-hand combat, now we'd hesitate. Oh, we're killing a lot of innocent people by doing that. Oh, we're going to question that. So that's what technology sometimes does, is it makes you the same exact process, the same exact result, but now because you make it so easy, you don't question it. You make it so easy, you make it so effortless, right? You don't question it. But yeah, that's the point of the objective look at abortion, is you're not saying not to do it. You're not saying it shouldn't be illegal. You're saying understand the nature of the process. That's what you're saying. So the word itself is negative. the semantics are kind of telling that you have to hide behind that. So in other words, you're saying, oh, it would be wrong, but you just got to try to hide behind a different definition. And then finally, you have that you understand human nature. So you ultimately would be saying, in a perfect world, abortion wouldn't exist. But, and forget about even health and assault cases, like those things wouldn't happen in a perfect world, right? And that's a minimal number of cases. But you would say, you know that people are going to do it anyway, so why not let it be legal, at least, right, to give them a better shot? So you're not condoning or endorsing it, you're understanding human nature and saying, well, people are going to find bootleg ways to do it, right? Like, you know, we've seen that in history somewhat. People are going to find other ways to do it, so you may as well, right, okay, fine, do it if you want to, and here's a better way to do it, right? Like, do it more openly. Like, same thing with drugs, arguably, you can make that argument. Maybe hard drugs should be legal because you're going to just, and maybe controlled, you know, you get certain amounts or whatever, but people are going to go out of their way and try to get it anyway, so now they're going to go to a shady dealer and get killed, or you're going to give that shady dealer a lot of power and resources and money, right, infrastructure, so you may as well make it legal. The best way to control something isn't to make it illegal, opposite interpretation concept at work here. The best way to control something is not to make it illegal, because then people will build their own criminal empire infrastructure, right? Ordinary people will be swayed by that. It's actually to make it legal and then control it, right? Okay, you give certain, because now you have a monopoly over it, now you have a justification for that. So ironically, that's sometimes a better way to control it, and then it gives you the power to shut it off completely by, you know, monopolizing it. Like, now you have all of it in your possession under the pretense that, oh, you're gonna, this is what gun control would do in a negative way, like, oh, we're just gonna check everybody's guns in or do an inventory count kind of thing. But now it sets up a pretense to confiscate and all that. But no, it's interesting, that framing. Like, I'm not saying not to do it in there, but people take it that way because of their own preconceived notion on the topic, right? At no point do I even say it should be legal. If you want to do it, that's fine, do it, right? I'm not telling you not to do it. This is what this is all about, absolute philosophy and objectivity. It's not about taking a position or making a claim, right? It would be an observation, like, okay, in a perfect world, this wouldn't need to happen because people justify it with assault and health reasons. But the point is that, yeah, in an ideal perfect world, it wouldn't happen, is at least the premise, right? That it's an undesirable negative thing, but then it's turned into a positive to try to kind of rationalize it. So, again, you understand human nature, so even if you're against it, right, there'd be some complex absolutist interpretation here that I would have to pose. Like, there's like two dueling things. This is actually very, very nuanced, right? So, in an ideal perfect world, abortions wouldn't exist. But then, the subjective interpretation would understand human nature, so you would say, but we can't outlaw it because we know people are going to do it anyway. And then, hey, from Saudi Arabia, hey, how's it going? You would say that, hey, how are you? We get a 6-7 meme in here, that's peak. I finally actually looked at what that was like a week ago. Like, I had heard it, but I didn't know what it was from, so I finally listened to the song. Oh, thanks for the like. Oh yeah, here we go. Now the algorithm thing. This was happening last stream too, where the algorithm just randomly gives us like 20 viewers. I don't get how that works. Yeah, 69 replaced 67 replaced 69 at least, so that's more kid friendly, I guess. Like some guy, where is this road hitting? This is like in central New York. It's a good song. Yeah, I didn't hate the song. I don't think I had ever heard it actually though, despite all the hype around it. Like the Skibbity toilet thing, I had to one day research that. That it's actually given to me by Timbaland and it's sped up, and it's like, so he's not really saying Skibbity. Like, it's maybe embarrassing that you know that, but you have to research that because of how nauseatingly much that you hear about it. And this is like central New York, like around Syracuse area. Hey, how's it going? Okay, so what I was saying on the abortion topic, right, like the objective absolutist philosophy would not be saying it should be illegal. In an ideal perfect world, it wouldn't need to happen, but it shouldn't be illegal because you understand human nature that people are going to do it anyway, so it should be legal, but your end goal is also to not preserve the stimuli acme. Yeah, it's not actually too bad today. Yesterday was pretty bad, snow and everything. Like, you want to also create the village of 100 effect, not really depopulation the way people would frame it. Actually, I hate when people say that, but it's actually more like minimalism, like you're choosing not to have kids for a couple generations to reduce the overall population by choice, not by government or whatever. But you would do this, and so what you're saying is that there's like a bit of a nuanced interpretation here. You would want, even though you're saying that abortions ideally shouldn't happen, you're also allowing them and encouraging them because you know people can't control themselves. So the end goal is for abortions not to exist, but you know that people are going to do them anyway, so you let it be for now. And the end goal is, okay, you want to create the village of 100 concept that we talk about. So the only way to do that is, okay, you accept that people can't control themselves and self-govern and do that, right? So because you understand human nature, okay, have as many abortions as you want, right? It's almost like some Faustian scenario, like, oh no, go ahead, I'm encouraging you to do it, because the end goal is to create that village of 100 effect, right? There is something really interesting with that. So you're trying to, you're not trying to do it, but you know that, okay, people can't control their urges and their inherent hedonistic, and hey Zane, how's it going? They're trying to control that hedonistic thing, and you can't do it. So you know that people are going to do it anyway. So rather than expecting people to be in this self-governing, enlightened state already, that they can do that, self-governed, self-actualized, village of 100, minimalism, whatever it is that you're doing, you know that people can't handle that yet. So let them solve the problem not by defeating or conquering the stimuli acme, as I call it, right? That's too much to expect of people. But no, go ahead, still do your half-mass hedonism, but now you get to abort it for now to remove the need. One of the key absolute phrases, remove the need. And then in the long term, right, eventually maybe we can get to that point, but that does prevent the sort of excess overextension that I call it. So that's one of the most nuanced takes you could possibly have, that ideally it shouldn't exist, but you're preventing it, but you know people are going to do it anyway, so you allow it to happen. You even not really encourage it, but you enable it so that people can get to the point where they can conquer the half-mass hedonism and stimuli acme, not stimuli acme preservation. And then you also get, so your end goal is you don't need it, but for now you understand human nature and that people do need it. So, okay. But yeah, this is a good example of don't specify the conflict too, of like, it's not really about that, right? Like okay, here's another one, OnlyFans, right? People say, oh, OnlyFans is bad and should be banned or should be illegal, right? But it just became ubiquitous with a certain type of online content. There's other sites like that. There's been, I've heard from a friend, right? Not that I would ever use it, but that's a good example too. If everybody's like me, it wouldn't exist because I wouldn't use it. Like, what's the point? Like, there's some cult of personality thing, like maybe some celebrities on there, or somebody who has a following online, so people find that satisfying. But other than that, it's like, why not just some George Costanza quote, like you could apply yourself and get the same thing in real life, in person, or, I don't get what the appeal of it is, some random person online versus, right, somebody that you would know or somebody in person, or again, you can find that same sort of stuff for free, presumably. Again, I've heard from a friend. But the point is, it becomes ubiquitous with that, but the same sort of thing existed online and other sites, and there's even now, and it will continue to exist in the future. So don't specify the conflict in the sense that it's not about that, right? It's about human nature. So if OF was offline tomorrow, you think, oh, human lustful desires and fantasies and things are not going to exist anymore? Like they haven't existed from the entire history of mankind, that you might have had concubines and, illicit prostitution and all. Like, the form changes over time based on technology and conveniences and all this. But how can you think like, oh, this one thing that exists now, this one website, is just a means to do it easier or more convenient? That's not to blame for why people want it in the first place, right? The demand is there. They'll just find it somewhere else. The adult film industry exists. Like, these things all exist. So that doesn't mean that that's the issue, right? That's just a reflection of it's like focusing on the symptom versus the disease. Those things all exist anyway. And so it's a reflection of human lust or desires or things like that. So I don't think the solution is ever, oh, let's just ban that thing that makes it easier to do it. It'd almost be like a force amplification argument for like gun control, like, oh, it's the gun that's to blame because it makes it easier to do this thing, which is true, it does make it easier to do it. but isn't the ultimate issue the fact that a person would be willing or wanting to do that anyway? A great example I use there is the Darrell Brooks thing. Even though it's a horrible event, but like just Darrell Brooks used a car, right, to run over people in a parade. So now you could use that logic to say, well, we should ban cars, right? We should, cars can be used as a dangerous weapon. But it was his intent to do it, right? Because, if somebody's really willing to do something bad, now how can you regulate that? Right, so if that happened more, pretend, okay, let's do this thought experiment. Instead of mass shootings, let's say what we have is mass events like that, where people run people over now, like large groups of people or crowds or whatever, obviously a horrible event. Now would we focus on cars? So like mass shootings stop tomorrow, but now they're all mass run over, parade events, stuff like that, horrible as they are. Would that, now we're going to ban cars, right? So we're specifying the conflict. We're blaming the tool, not the user, the weapon, not the user, right? So that's the easy way to demonstrate, like, all it would take is to change the form of it, but you're not seeing what the big picture is. You're not going to solve the intent, right? The fact that people have the intent to do it, that they'd be willing to do it, that they, are, I don't know. It just is, you're focusing on the wrong thing. So it's easy to always blame something. Oh, let's get rid of OnlyFans. Then tomorrow it'll be another site. Then another. You're not addressing the core underlying issue, right, of human nature or whatever it is that you have a problem with. So again, adult films have existed for a long time. Other sites like that have existed. They'll continue to exist in the future. So on one hand, you could blame the user, like the demand, the fact that people want that, right? Let's assume the gender, but it doesn't have to be that streamlined. But like, okay, men want this content, so women are just creating it. So I'm not blaming the women. I'm blaming the men for desiring it. And I can't blame the women for doing something convenient, like, oh, they can do this safely in their own room and just make videos and make money for it more than they're making from their job. It's hard to convince people not to do it, right? You say, oh, well, it's a bad thing and it's immoral, but it's like, it doesn't expose them to the risks that you would have had in the past of like, oh, you have to do something in person. And it doesn't, they're just for taking a few videos and pictures in their room, they're making more money than they do from their stressful job that they hate. It's very, very hard to convince people not to do that. So the solution is more not that, to shame them and say, oh, you're bad for doing it. It's to look at the demand aspect. Why do people desire it? Why do people pay for it or want it? So the real solution is provide a free alternative. And you kind of have that in real life to some extent, but it just takes more work. But no, there's even like fallacies with that. Like where, sex psychologists, by the way, I've discussed fetishes and done a fetish seminar before. I should use that as a tagline, but my most viewed video on this channel is actually discussing foot fetishes. Amazing. But no, that's not my fault. See, that just happens to be what people gravitate towards. Why not Xanax? For what context? Nice day. Yeah, it's at least better than the last couple. But when was that? It wasn't yesterday. It was the day before. I was streaming and it was like a whiteout and it was horrible. So yeah, what I was saying is it's the innate human nature. So this is in like right near Syracuse, New York, central New York, where Carmelo Anthony played. I guess I can always use that as a point of reference because he's like, who's the most famous person from Syracuse? I guess Jerry Seinfeld went to Oswego, which is a kind of little north of here, but he didn't really go there the whole time. He went there briefly and then left because it's kind of a shitty area and a shitty college. Like, let's do a stand-up routine. What's the deal with Oswego? And give me some, I don't know, like I didn't go there for college. I went there to transfer away to a better college, right? Like, I don't know, you can do some meme. I feel like not a lot of people know that because it's such an obscure fact. But yeah, Carmelo went to Syracuse. I'm sure there's other good players. I just don't know off the top of my head. There was somebody who was a bust, who was supposed to be good, like Michael Carter Williams or somebody, or somebody else too. But they kind of washed out. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the fact that I don't know what exactly the Xanax comment was about. I was trying to address like how would that have applied to this? But no, it's like, yeah, you have the lustful desire, you have all of this, and you know what I'll say immediately is I'm going to praise the YouTube algorithm. This has given me, even offhandedly, and it might punish me for not being able to retain the viewers like it's randomly giving me, but like it's done more in this short span of time, just in like a few weeks of me streaming on YouTube, than Twitch ever did. I never would have these kind of viewer spikes like it's giving me here. So that's a good thing, although again, the kind of content I'm doing is not exactly conducive to viewership, and I understand that, and I don't really even necessarily care in the sense that whatever, this is just one thing that I've always discussed. So right, objective philosophy, absolutist philosophy is not exactly the most appealing, lowest common denominator type of thing. Although we do get some interesting comments in there, 6'7", 69. Like, I don't mind doing that. Yeah, if people mention stuff, I'll discuss that. Then I'll use it as a jump-off associative point. Right. But again, okay, the final point on this, don't specify the conflict, would mean don't blame OnlyFans, don't blame this, don't blame the creators who are just doing something easy and convenient, right, for money. Blame the people who desire it, who pay for it, right? So you pose a preferable alternative, either for free or either in real life, right? These are desires that people have. Or here's one thing I'll criticize heavily, is like the adult film thing that we're talking about. People will blame that and say, oh, that ruined my marriage, right? This content that starts with a P, I won't say the word, right? That ruins your marriage or something, right? If that's all it takes to ruin your marriage, you have to consider two possible things. Number one is maybe that isn't what you want ultimately. Like, you know, maybe you're not happy with that. And you might say, oh, fantasy could ruin anything. Like, you could get desensitized by watching movies and playing games or whatever, by media in general of your life. Like, oh, wow, life is so boring compared to this exciting, you know, media content that we consume. So you'll blame that for desensitizing you, but not look at the fact that, okay, maybe something is lacking in your life itself. And the same thing again with the adult film. So the solution isn't to censor that kind of thing, but the same thing again with the adult film stuff. Oh, that ruined your marriage. So maybe your marriage isn't so good in the first place. Maybe you're not happy with it. Maybe it's just revealing some deficiency there. Or maybe you can bring some of that into your life, like some of the fantasies and stuff like that. But what it's really showing you is that it's a false absolute that's being posed. Like, oh, society wants you to restrict that inherent desire that you have, the hedonistic and natural kind of stimuli acme, reduce it to one person and one person only, right? Because that's easier to control, but that doesn't mean that's really what you want, or that doesn't mean that's really what a person would choose. So you're being kind of pressured to do that. But then, oh, look at all these other options and fantasies and different things that you have. Like, yeah, would you rather be with the supermodel person that you're seeing act these things out, or would you rather be with your wife who happened to be in the same area as you, and you happen to be, you know, because of the nearness postulate, like, oh, because of proximity and this and that, now you have to pretend like that's absolute and that's what you want. Like, oh, would you rather be with a celebrity or your celebrity crush or the person you're with, right? Like, obviously you're pretending it's an absolute, like, oh no, they're my love and it's meant to be, and it's, you know, soulmate and this and that. You're not saying that because that's actually true. It's kind of psychologically, it's more about the intent. Like, the part that's psychologically disingenuous here is the fact that you're pretending something is absolute to try to convince yourself, right, that, oh, it's my love and soulmate. Out of 8 billion people, what are the chances they happen to be in my local geographical area? But, you know, a person would know. Like, you wouldn't think that, oh, out of all the people in the world that you could possibly be with, this is really the one and only you want to be with, and restrict that to them just for that reason. Like, so you're creating some artificial construct that you have to keep struggling with. So it's very disingenuous to think like, oh no, that's really what you want. So you're just having that false absolute exposed by this resource that, again, play into fantasies. On one hand, you can just look at it, okay, it's just fantasy. That doesn't mean you have to let it ruin anything, but it shows like a repressive state. So you would show like, oh, the solution is let's censor reality itself. Not even about the adult films. It's like, let's censor the very idea of this freedom and inherent hedonistic desire and reality that people have. Let's just censor it out of existence, and then everything's fine, right? So you have to create this curated element. You have to say curate reality in such a way that nothing contradicts the false absolute that we're posing and forced to do. As in, again, the specifying the simulacrum is a great example, right? Oh, that marriage is absolute and it's love and it's meant to be in a soulmate, but it just requires a few simple things. It requires you not to be friends with people of the same gender. You might be attracted to them, so we have to, this is absolute, but the only thing you have to do is a few simple requirements. You have to not consume any sort of content that might make you question that. You can't explore your, fantasies and things like this, except in that context. You can't freely be friends with 4 billion people on the planet because they share the same gender as your partner. All these simple things that you have to do to, maintain this false absolute. Like, you might question, maybe it's not absolute if you have to do all these things. That's the most extreme of all. And speaking of the whole Seinfeld Oswego thing, this is like a bit that I almost did that is kind of like that. Like, you know how your marriage and your soulmate is absolute? Because you only have to do one thing to maintain that. You have to not be friends with people of the same gender. So, wow, in order to maintain the soulmate and absolute that you're so secure about and it's so meant to be, you just have to sacrifice being friends with 4 billion people on the planet. Just 4 billion people, no big deal, right? And wait a second, though, that's assuming that you're straight. Like, if you're a straight man, then you can't be friends with other women, right, other than your partner. But what if you were bisexual? Now, if you're bisexual, you can't be friends with all 8 billion people because you could be attracted to any of them. So what a great compromise. You can't have any friends at all in order to pose this false absolute. Like, what a ridiculous expectation, but that's basically what is posed as, like, that's posed. The soulmate, the love, whatever, would be to simply say, okay, we're going to have to censor out of reality being friends with people like that. We have to censor out of reality fantasies and options and awareness of different things, right? So you have this like rigid structure that says, okay, it's absolute. It just requires to cut everything else out of our awareness and existence and perception in order to value it. So that's a very disingenuous intellectual aspect, right? So you'd say, right, it seems to be like that's a form of like, self-control, that you're not indulging in those things, like even self-pleasure, let's say. But the problem is that if that's all it takes to invalidate something, then maybe that isn't so strong or absolute after all, right? So it's not posing what you should do. It's just saying, like, you should be free to do and look at anything you want to do, right? Whether it be the self-gratification there or whether it be, again, the adult industry that we're talking about. You should be able to do those things freely, and they shouldn't be a threat. And if they are a threat, then maybe that shows you there's some imbalance and deficiency at work here. Okay, so let's look at the next concept. We went over some of this yesterday, or the day before, anti-virtues and stuff. So let's look at the fact that we have this iPhone mic picks up pretty good. Like, because normally I would be having it a lot closer, but now it's like on a stand on the dash, and it still picks up pretty well. Even over the noise of the car and stuff. But yeah, it's going to be, or yeah, that could be like a guessing game. Try to guess where I am. Like, let's play real IRL GeoGuessr. The problem is there's too many signs and things that would give it away. Somebody did actually accurately guess that the other day, because he's like from Fort Drum, Watertown, so this is a little south. Do something, whether good or bad, but like they can easily be bugging you, and you make like crowds of people. You make a whole spectacle. Somebody did that in like New York City, where they almost got arrested, or they did get arrested for making a whole public chaos just because they're giving away free PS5s or some shit live on stream. Maybe that was Kai Cenat or somebody, I can't remember. But yeah, okay, this is something I was discussing yesterday too, the fact that, I keep saying yesterday, it was the day before, like, there's so much, if you put as much effort into your job as you do into your job and your work and things like that, as you do into your measure in life, like what your purpose is, philosophy, things like that, it would greatly diminish your, even to say not what it would do, it's just like, maybe you should do that. Maybe you should put more thought into that and less thought into your, not even less, like, you should put the same amount of thought into your measure in your life, like why you're doing what you're doing, as you do into simply doing it, right? But you often don't see that, and you even see the act of thinking and being objective as being deficient somehow, like it's your fault for thinking about it, not a fault of the process, right? So you see this always as fallacy right? The process in front of you, whether it be society, whether it be a corporation you work for, whether it be government, that can never be flawed. And you see like social contrivance as a way to reinforce that. That can never be flawed. The only thing that can be flawed is you and your reaction to it. So, it's your fault for not adequately overcompensating for the process, not that the process can ever be flawed. So this is how, like, throughout history, World War II Germany, you're just spoiled, you're just entitled, that you want, we had to deal with World War I. Like, pretend you're living in World War II Germany. We had to deal with World War I, and it was horrible, and now things are finally getting better economically or something. So, you're just a spoiled, entitled brat for complaining about the current circumstance, right? Even though in hindsight we see that you would have been right to complain about certain things or question them. But that would be the response. Like, it's your fault for not dealing with it. Just put up with it. This subversive, empirical, unqualified authority state. Not the fact that there could be actually something flawed with the process. So anytime you criticize something or observe some flaw of a process, right, it's always thrown back on the individual to say, well, it's your fault for not dealing with it, or your fault for not adequately overcompensating for the flawed process. Not that the process can ever be held accountable or be flawed. Or, like, again, it'll be discredited like, you're only saying that because blank. Like, because you're lazy or because you don't want to do something. But I pose this as a minimalist standard too. This hypothetical character, let's say, or whatever, you could say a hypothetical person who's like, they're able to, I rarely do this like when I'm stopped or parked, but it's mostly, I guess, convenient when I'm driving. But this is like, I like to look away from people, like in a place like, we're looking into the woods almost or something. Not like in a place where there's going to be a ton of people that we catch, right? Just to show the intentionality of that. But no, let's finish this a little bit. This topic is going to go on pretty much forever. That's why I'm even doing these as almost a joke, the point 1, point 2 titles, right? Because that's crazy. But there's just so much to cover in this topic. But no, what was I saying? This hypothetical character who would be like, they're the most patient person ever. They can wait forever. That's why they hate waiting, because they know it doesn't serve a purpose and they could be kept waiting forever. So now you turn the ego on itself. They're the most patient person ever. They waited, for years for something very minor. They could wait forever. But then you realize, it doesn't serve a purpose, and it's just a way to control you, to say, it's a good thing, it's a virtue to wait, and control you. You could wait forever. You could eat one meal a day. You could eat one meal a week, or you could tolerate anything. But that's why you hold it accountable. There better be a good reason to tolerate it, right? You want to make sure it's not for no good reason. Otherwise, it'll be arbitrary. Okay, you'll be made to tolerate stuff just because the power structure wants to exploit that, or other people want to take, if you give an inch, they take a mile. People just want to exploit your good nature. But right, that doesn't make it a sound process. So the most tolerant, patient person ever would not do that without good reason. They would hold it accountable and say, I don't take any ego from doing this. I can do it. Fine. I could tolerate anything. But you want to make sure, right, okay, if I'm going to tolerate it, then I'll tolerate it in the wild on my own, not as part of an inhibitive, subversive society structure that controls everything, right? Because that's the trade-off, right? You expect something in return for the inhibition of society, rather than feeling like, you're entitled or privileged. There is actually a base, false inherent contrivance response concept that I talk about. So the problem is that what you have is the ability, I like how it goes to 0, even though I'm watching my own chat. That doesn't even make sense. But yeah, the one point to say is that we have, you would either, okay, fine, I'll tolerate whatever. Like, it's like when people gratify, look at how hardworking somebody is, or look at all that they're doing. It's like, why would you take gratification from that? It's all for zero-sum self-interest, zero-sum means anyway, right? If it's too stressful, you don't want to do it, then do something less minimalistic that might make you less money, but that you're more at peace with, and you don't require as much. It's all for zero-sum self-interest. Part of the conflict is to the cognitive dissonance of unqualified empirical authority, right? You could be a minimalist, don't require, don't desire as much, right? All of this. And then you also have, I don't know if that means like maybe it's even crashing. You would think it would give me better feedback. No, because that's a little concerning that that one should never go away if I'm on there. But no, I appreciate the YouTube algorithm. Shout out to that. Even if, again, it sort of would punish me that, like, for not maintaining those viewers. We've gotten some good response in the last couple, and so I do appreciate that. But yeah, okay, the next concept is the fact, I mean, I could do other things on this. I was just mainly trying to use it for this. Like, you know what I wanted to test, I was actually mentioning, I want to test doing Hearthstone, just because if it can handle on here 1080p, or maybe I should just do it on YouTube in general. But I don't know how the orientation and stuff like that works. Like, okay, let's say I stream it on my PC. Would it still be in this mobile kind of resolution, or would it allow me to... No, I don't think that... I think you can do it like that too. So, like, maybe YouTube is just better for stuff like that. I don't know. I was trying to separate it, right? I was trying to do anything like gaming related, I'll do on Twitch. And anything like this, just chatting type thing, I'll do on YouTube. For whatever reason, that just seemed like something I wanted to try to do. But yeah, there's a good psychological concept with that too. It's like, if you want to do something, do it as like a routine, just every day, even if instead of like, oh no, it has to be perfect just right, then you'll keep inhibiting yourself forever with perfectionism. A lot of people do that, but also do it in a way that feels like, okay, I'm doing it just as a throwaway, like there's no burden of consequence. I'm just doing it for fun, and then if it turns into something, right, that's a better way to build a routine than like, oh no, it has to be perfect just right. Even though that's a good to have a high standard, I don't know, there's like an in-between. So like, this is my third channel, so that's why I was willing to do these like every day, and I didn't care about spamming people because it was a smaller channel. Whereas I didn't want to do it on my main channel. Not that it's like that big of a deal, but it's just like, there is a good psychology behind that you're doing it just to do it, and then who knows, you're not as worried about it. I don't know, it's a good burden of consequence type of thing. So, alright, so to put a wrap on that concept, it's just the idea that we were talking about this character, this person who's the most tolerant, most patient, most capable ever, most hardworking. But that's why they don't do it for no good reason, right? Sure, they could wait forever. They've waited 10 years for some simple minor thing, right? They could wait forever, but they want to make sure then that their tolerance isn't wasted and taken advantage of, right? Because they want to make sure there's a good reason for it, instead of just, again, waiting for nothing forever. So same thing with the other thing. So when those things are glorified, it's kind of a bit of a trap. Like, oh, look how hardworking this person is for their own zero-sum means, zero-sum self-interest, right, for their own thing that they require, money that they require, desire for themselves. Like, so what is really to be gratified about that? How it's, struggling with the cognitive dissonance of an unqualified empirical authority structure, right? Wow, so impressive. It's like, maybe that's a sign you shouldn't settle for that, or maybe, do something else that doesn't require that. Like, so it's a trick to just say, no matter what's in front of you, right? It could be, again, World War II Germany, it could be China right now. It doesn't matter. Like, oh, there's a certain gratification, and look how well I deal with this. Look what a good subject I am to an unqualified empirical authority structure. Instead of, oh, maybe the struggle comes not from the ability to do the false absolute, but rather that it's not absolute in the first place, right? That's the whole premise of that discussion. So, because otherwise then you're always just, okay, whatever state you happen to be in that you didn't choose, right? You didn't create this government or society or whatever you're exposed to. You didn't choose it, you didn't create it. But now when you're going about it, okay, you might tolerate it, you put up with it, it serves a certain functional basis. I get it, I'm not saying don't do it. But it's rather posing as an absolute, like, oh, if there's any conflict you have, it's your fault, your lack of ability. You're just not capable enough, you're just entitled, you're just stupid, whatever. Not that there could actually be any potential flaws actually with it. Or, almost what I should do is I should go to a place that's like, I don't know, so like you're not looking in just one car, like I'm not singling whatever that dude is out, but it just happens to be in front of me. So yeah, let me see how my battery's doing, because I'm charging... This battery drains really fast, right? It's already down to 50%. So maybe I should do that. Like, how do I switch from because I've just been craving trying to do that. Hearthstone session. My biggest thing, I guess, is like I don't like the way that downloading stuff works on here. Because like if you download it based from YouTube, it's downscaled to 720p, which for this I'm streaming in 720p anyway, so it doesn't matter. But okay, let me do like one more concept here maybe, and or like I don't know how some of these controls work. I never mess with it. Like if I want to go AFK for a second, how I don't know. I haven't messed with that really. Okay, well, let's do one more concept here. So you have the non-accountable and non-credible basis. Or rather, I think the way I would phrase it is more like if you don't hold something accountable, then it's not credible. So the non-accountable false absolute. Like religion, oh, you can't question it, and then it's absolute. Right, like, oh, you're a heretic, or that you're the problem, right? The emperor has no clothes fallacy. Oh, it is absolute, but then if you question it too much or at all, then you're the problem, not it, right? Instead, especially when it's being posed as an absolute, it should be able to hold up to any amount of scrutiny. So your questioning and perception shouldn't matter, right? If it's absolute, it would be self-evident as much as the need to breathe oxygen and stuff like that. And again, like the fallacy that something is necessary makes it invalid. Like, oh, this process is good. It just requires a ton of organization, empirical structure, authority, social contrivance, overcompensation. It requires all of this, right? And then it becomes seemingly absolute or credible, right? So like, oh yeah, imagine if I or you had that much resource, right? Give you power over the government and society in all these different ways, and then you'll seem validated, won't you? So it's kind of backwards. You're not holding authority or this structure accountable to say, why should we value it? Why should we defer to it? You're doing the opposite. You're saying because it's already established, now you suck up to it kind of, or you, not really that, but you kind of use the fact that it's already powerful, like might is right kind of, you use the fact that it's already established to validate it. Well, that many people couldn't have been wrong, or the fact, things are the way they are because they're meant to be kind of a thing. And then, again, like the fact that being aware of the process would be defining or the problem, right? It's like everything is a process, and it's your fault for questioning the process, or it's your fault for being aware of the process. Like, oh, that makes you fake if you're too self-aware or somehow negative, because like, oh, you're aware of this process of social contrivance or interaction or whatever, right? So being aware of it is the problem, not the process itself. Rather than, oh, you should be able to be aware of everything all the time and then it would be fine. But the fact that it's a flawed process because it requires this lack of awareness, this willful or, right? So that's somehow the problem, right? Is that you think too much, or that you're too aware, not that what you're aware of has some potential flaw or is invalidating or requires that. You also have the awareness that everything is subjective, right? That if something's objective or inherent or absolute, the way that sometimes people throw around these terms, that would be the laws of nature, right? So it wouldn't be up to you. That would be and even that we try to subvert with our technology and stuff, but the fact that you have to react to it would show that it's right. Even like, oh, people can't breathe underwater, or people need oxygen to breathe, but then you'll say, oh, we'll give them some sort of pill or oxygen tank or something. But the fact that you need that is at least addressing the inherent need, right? That's the contrivance response, or the response to the inherent reality or the need. So the problem is the fact that I didn't understand what this guy was actually saying. He said, why not Xanax? And then he said, it's more about the intent. Like, I appreciate, okay, he's responding along to this was a while ago, but I didn't understand exactly in what context he meant those things. So I was trying to respond to it, or what I always try to do is I just try to read whatever everybody says just to give them their, respect that I'm reading it, but I sometimes don't necessarily understand, especially like at what point they say it. So yeah, everything is subjective. That's why you need gods and absolute figures to try to bypass critical thinking, because otherwise you could say, well, even if this seems like a useful thing or valid thing, it's ultimately just subjective. Whether it be laws even, or society or government, everything is subjective, so there's no basis for empirical authority. You could choose to defer to it if you want, but that choice is always yours and it's arbitrary. Instead of this false absolute that we just defer to unquestioningly, right? Everything is subjective, and if it's not, then it doesn't come down to the human level, right? Anything that you have to acknowledge or you have to defer to or you have to kind of do, it's not absolute or it's not objective, because it comes down to your opinion. Like, you see this conversation stupidly sometimes with morals, right? Religious people will say that. They'll ask, a subjective human being will ask another subjective human being whether they believe in their subjective belief and view, whether morality or God, or I guess morality specifically, is absolute. And the subjective person will either say, yes, in my subjective opinion, I believe it to be objective or absolute, or no, in my subjective opinion, I believe it not to be absolute. Like, neither of those are, and then a crowd will cheer or boo them on. All of these things are on the subjective level. You could cheer or boo just the opposite thing, or you could say just the opposite. So that framing is so stupid, because yes, you're asking for an objective answer from a subjective person on a subjective issue, right? But the fact that it's even up to them, or that social stigma, and you might think, oh, it's like mass appeal or something, social Darwinism. But even social Darwinism, like 99.99 people agree on something, that's fine. That's a functional basis for society, but it's not it's not actually valid, like, or it doesn't make it absolute, because again, hypothetically, let's look throughout history. If the majority of people, or 99% of people, or society agreed on or allowed something to happen, that doesn't necessarily make that right, does it? Or like in China right now, right, the majority are kept in the dark, you could argue, so it's done in a not genuine way, right, like censorship and stuff. But even if hypothetically, let's say 99.9% of people agreed on something that isn't right, whether because of our lack of knowledge of science or, you know, things throughout history that people have believed, that doesn't make them right just because a raw majority, large number of people do something or believe something. So let's see, let's go through a few more here. Maybe I should end it, take a break, and then I can try later, just to see how doing Hearthstone or something on here would be. Or again, maybe I could do it from my computer and just do it on YouTube instead, or I could try to multi-stream it. I don't know. I don't really like the multi thing, because it feels like it might have issues, or it might somehow, your internet's not going to be good enough to handle it. Not that it shouldn't be, but certainly on here I wouldn't do that, because or maybe I did do my first multi-stream on there anyway. But like, if it's in too high of a quality, this thing can barely handle it as it is. Yeah, okay, so you might define value by social contrivance or appearances, which are kind of arbitrary, interchangeable. They can be manipulated in just that sense. So you'll say, oh no, but that makes a person genuine, how they present themselves or how they socially interact. But then all it would take to subvert that is, oh, they could just be aware of it. Like, you could just be aware, oh, so you'll condemn the person then who's manipulative that way, but then you're leaving yourselves at their mercy. Like, all it would take to manipulate you is for somebody to put up appearances that you want to see and performative aspects. So like, the person who would appear negative by that basis of value would be somebody who just doesn't care, or who's aware of the nature of the process, or who's even choosing to be truly genuine, like not by trying to hide behind that, versus you'll be controlled by the fakest person who puts up appearances, and then you fall for the initial basis. And then we can look at the initial versus the larger process concept, which I talk about, which is supposed to be, you know, don't fall for the trap of like what's presented to you or what's immediately in front of you or with your five senses, because everything is carefully curated, and you should even be aware of that. Like, what you're being shown by government, by media, everything is carefully curated to show it a certain way. So why would you take that absolutely seriously? right? Instead of being aware of the larger process, like, okay, here's the larger process at work that you wouldn't, it is kind of how people are controlled. You wouldn't be okay with it if you were aware of it. So you have to be, it's like euphemisms and overcompensations, it has to be framed a certain way and all of this, right? Then you're okay with it. So it comes down to how well can your senses be subverted, how well can a process be overcompensated for, how well can it have pretenses and some superficial ego layer on top to subvert it, even if the process underneath is the same, right? Instead of let's be more neutral and then realize, okay, let's hold the process accountable. Would we be okay with it without all the appearances and smoke and mirrors? So this is how rule by omission control works. Like the idea that, you defer to invisible authority, you want some sort of false absolute, out of sight, out of mind, non-accountable, even though it's just as flawed if it was in front of you as anything else. And then it comes down to like sort of your flawed perception of not questioning the soundness of a process. You would just preconceive it and treat it as a default and a false absolute that sort of bypasses your critical thinking, and it controls you, and it comes down to appearances and pretenses. So if you set up a good enough, think about the steps to this, right? How do you set up empirical authority? How would society do it? Does it answer all the questions? Does it have the best some objective absolute basis, or does it indoctrinate people in youth before they're old enough to critically think for themselves, and then it constantly reinforces that, it threatens to starve them out, uses resources, monopoly over means, right, through corporations and government and even parents to threaten them with that if they don't abide by something. It conditions them, trains them like animals, and then when they're old enough to critically think for themselves, it frames everything in false duality. They're like, oh, look at them rebelling against this thing they didn't choose and were exposed to for their whole life. Non-consensually, they're forced into it, and now they're being rebellious by just simply doing one of the many things that people can self-actualize and, engage in the human variable of actions that they can take. But now we treat our established structure as a false absolute. So that's all it takes to reach the state. So that's arbitrary and could be used to achieve a lot of different states. So that doesn't validate it, right? If you look at the unsound nature of the process, the same thing could be done, again, World War II Germany or China now or various other societies throughout history. So it's a flawed process that shouldn't be taken as absolute, should be more actively aware, held accountable. But people don't like to think about that. They'd rather just insist upon it. But you're insisting upon something you didn't choose, so that's a hard thing to reconcile. There's a false absolute to value or specify, or it comes down to the degree of overcompensation and relative comfort. It's kind of like the bread and circuses aspect, so it allows you to see that. And then, let's see. I was trying to let my battery sort of dictate this, 41%. And this thing takes forever to charge, too. It's like an Anchor battery bank, which maybe isn't a flaw of that, but what does that even mean? Number 3, number 2, number 1? Is that like your most viewed? Because everybody will be that. That shows you they watch for a certain period of length of time. Like everybody will be constantly switching between number 1, number 2 viewers because they're, you're not exactly a very big channel. But no, what I was saying is that you have the unqualified empirical authority, you have the degree of overcompensation, bread and circuses, attraction, or pretend you're objective, then you would, being objective would seem to turn on or have a negative basis of specifics. Like, oh, you're objective and neutral, and you neutralize and equalize the things you didn't choose. So it seems like you have something against them, like, oh, your family. You didn't choose your family. So that seems like a negative, but it's really just neutrality, because you're saying I'm not going to place undue emphasis on something I didn't choose and treat it as special or absolute just because of my nearness or exposure to it. Because you didn't choose it is the point. So you're just equalizing that. So you're actually being neutral and objective, but it would be framed as negative because you're expected to place undue emphasis or special value on it. This, again, that's why the human family comes into it. You would, if you value people, then you would value everyone, equally. So it would seem negative to those around you. Or even the other thing was like, you would kind of neutralize. You wouldn't treat your society as absolute. You wouldn't treat your government as absolute. Just, things you didn't choose, your race, anything. You wouldn't care about all those things. You would just treat it as like, you would treat it for what it is, which is things you didn't choose, and now you can assess their value the same as anything else. But that shows you that the basis of value of many things is false. It tries to bypass critical thinking, again, nearness postulate. So by that same logic, if your family was someone different, you would value them just as much because you didn't choose them either. So it's interchangeable and arbitrary. Same thing like with your country or whatever, you'll just indignantly insist upon it no matter what. And so it treats it as though it's absolute even though it's not. So right, let's put a wrap on the don't specify the conflict concept, which is just a sub-part of this larger stigma effect that we're talking about, how human history and awareness actively of human nature and flaw by our own subjective standards should give you cause to pause about human nature and or about their credibility, right? And so you shouldn't be too sure of yourself, your flawed, limited senses, which have been exploited all throughout history to lead to all kind of fallacies that people have believed and been fooled by. And also be wary of human nature, whether it be in positions of power, whether it be the collective, right, have all been shown to be flawed by history. So it's not even like a negative perception. It's just like the majority of human history has been like that. So why would you think now is the exception? Yes, you have better technology. Yes, you have slightly more freedoms, but it's like you'll be fooled by some fallacy or another, or you'll be controlled by that technology just as much as you're freed by it. It's almost like it's the least amount of freedom that people would tolerate given this, not that it's really not positive. Like, oh, look how much, like, is the modern society better than those of the past, morally or freedom-wise, or is it just like, this is the least that they can get away with controlling you, like, this is the least that current society could be controlled with the amount of access to information and stuff like that we have. So you'll still be controlled as much as you can. It's just, it'll look better on the surface because, oh, we have these excess means and technology, so it kind of misframes the discussion, right? The intent isn't different, people aren't different, it's just the resources and the technology, the machination process is different. So yeah, don't give any man a monopoly over sin or virtue. Don't specify it that way, like, oh, it's their fault, it's this person. It comes down to that, right? Understand that larger process at work, right? That's sort of the checks and balances mentality to some degree. Like, don't assume the best or worst. Just no matter who it is, be careful, be wary. Same thing with like a certain power structure, a certain government, right? Don't give any man a monopoly over sin, or any government either. Some of my logical razors from my old debate format. So we touched a lot of ground, at least in that one. We were talking about the same concept, but don't apply it to OnlyFans, or don't apply, to anything that you would blame, right? Don't blame something like that for why. So, what it does is it reveals and exposes something about human nature that you might not want to accept, but it's not the cause of it, right? It might bring it out because it's so convenient. And if you censor everything out of reality, it might seem to change human nature and people's reactivity or what they're willing to tolerate or settle for. But the fact that people desire it in the first place would be the problem, right? So you're not addressing that nature. You're creating kind of the conflict of contrivance. You're kind of misframing it to your access to freedom is the issue, or options or imagination. That's the issue, right? Your access to that, not the fact that you would desire it in the first place, or not what it reveals about human nature or what you desire. So it's more about controlling what you have access to, not what the nature that brings out or reflects is, right? We try to hide from it, right? We try to censor reality, basically, as I call it.